Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Redefine the Circle. I'm Ashley Sunshine, co-owner and head of pitching development here at OGX, joined once again by our own Laura McDonald. Laura?
Hello.
Back again. Welcome to Redefine the Circle again. Okay, this is kind of like part two for us. Last episode, we talked a lot about biomechanics. We talked a lot about what it means, how we got into biomechanics, obviously not just because of your background and having a PhD in biomechanics, but really where we were as what was once S2 Breakthrough, now OGX, as far as answering coaching questions and how the connection between pitching patterns, being able to objectively understand them in a greater detail, how that links to the underhand arm action, how it's linked to ball flight data. We really talked a lot about the importance of the connectivity of that story, right? And why that I always express annoyance when we get sort of pegged just the biomechanics people. And maybe that comes from, people have good intent with that. But it's mostly of just because we're not just the biomechanics people. We really do not believe in just trying to change or alter a pitcher's patterns as if it's in some sort of silo, as if just because they look more cookie cutter or they look more ideal or more efficient, then that's positive. We make sure that we are always viewing a pitcher's patterns in context of all of the elements that go with her, like what it's doing to her velo, what it's doing to her break profile, what it's doing to any symptoms she may be having from a health and wellness standpoint. So that was a little recap of what last episode was really about. We referenced this in our last episode, but we are diving, I don't even say one layer deeper, multiple layers deeper in the biomechanics world right now through our partnership with UNO, University of Nebraska, Omaha. And so I'll kick it to you to just talk to our listeners today about, this may be a little bit of a recap from our last episode, but who they are, why this partnership, what makes it a good partnership, and then we'll go on into really introducing our listeners to the type of work that we're doing and why we feel as if this is really groundbreaking for our game and the position of pitching, that this isn't just like more biomechanics data. There is some out there, and why we think this is sort of a unique type of relationship with unique type of information.
Yeah. So, coming from the academic side, having, formal graduate training on the research side, I obviously know the value that a gold standard motion capture lab can bring to this kind of information and the questions that we want to try to answer in terms of what does affect performance and health and wellness for our pitchers. And the University of Nebraska at Omaha had a baseball pitching lab well established, and we're getting inquiries essentially from the community of, hey, do you also do softball, which is a very valid question, of course. And they realized, this is an opportunity for them to open their doors to another sport. The university itself, from a biomechanics standpoint, is a very, very well-established university in biomechanics, with not just from the sports side, but with, all other types of biomechanics. So whether it's understanding, disease and pathology and, linking to medical centers, it's not just sports biomechanics. So they have a really well-established reputation in the research community for doing, biomechanics research at a high level, which I think is fantastic. And when they reached out to us, to me specifically, because my background is in softball pitching biomechanics, and don't ever go back and read my graduate work, it's not worth it. But that's my background, and really going through, trying to answer some of these questions of, okay, we do baseball, right? And will that trickle down to softball? And so that was really ultimately where, their question was, can we do this? And can you help us do this? Because we get these inquiries, we want to tackle this, and just provide more opportunities for, not just the local Omaha community, but, really to establish that, their pitching lab is the place to go for softball research. And we're making a mark. It's great. It really is great. So we've been probably about a year and a half, almost 2 years into this relationship. And, the initial part really was trying just to get to a consensus based on our work with our own assessment, the work that we do with wearable sensors, with, my background and your background in the human body, of what does that analysis need to look like? What are we missing in data collection? What pieces of the puzzle based on what's currently out there, both in published literature, but also with our own, our own information, what's missing. And so, this partnership with such an established lab, such an established group of biomechanists, clinicians, it's not just access to the equipment, it's the people, that really help us to drive these questions, to dig multiple layers deeper into this data, to think differently about the way the pitching motion is analyzed, and to not just accept that if it was done in baseball, it's good enough for softball. So, we have made some really great strides over the last couple of months with our, our early pilot work of getting to a place where the analysis is so clear. It speaks a human language. It represents the totality of the pitching motion, including force plates under the feet at all times, full motion capture, markerless data, to really start to capture a comprehensive database of this good gold standard type data. And so it is the equipment, of course. They provide us the opportunity to really fill some gaps in what we don't have here at our facility, but it's the people too, and their knowledge and their expertise, and being able to help us in ways digging deeper in that lab that we currently can't. And it's a very reciprocal relationship. We come to them with, obviously our knowledge through our assessment process and our work, but we're asking very specific questions. This is not just about, let's just, collect more data. It's very specific questions. Right now it's helping us to fill the gaps of our assessment report that, we know are a gap from our wearable sensors, and trying to really understand, okay, what story can't we tell right now? What could we infer from now that we have some motion capture data matching up to our wearable sensors? And the thing I'm excited about is a lot of things, but is really validating a lot of this, technology that's available to coaches, because that's, it needs to be in the hands of coaches, and they need to have confidence in it. And so this early work of just let's just try to recreate what we're working on here, but with way better data and way more depth. And then let's dig into that extra stuff we didn't have access to. Really targeted research questions, and really helping to bring pitchers into the lab that want this information.
Yeah.
Because getting athletes into a biomechanics lab isn't always the easiest thing to do when you're, you're trying to collect research, so to speak.
Yeah.
So connecting it to performance is a big deal.
Yeah, I would say it's clear of what the UNO staff is bringing to the table: the lab, the equipment, the people, the experience, the reputation. But on our side, it's not just that, we love pitching and we're smart people. The episode that we shot a few weeks ago was really about this concept of this slow build, this gradual build of data. And even though it was limited to being on wearable sensors, this connectivity of what it was telling us. We are able, when you say targeted research questions, it is very, very important. I just want to give some examples. If this were maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we were going into this relationship without the knowledge that we have now, and this happens when coaches, researchers go into a biomechanics lab, they come out with variables that say, for example, trunk flexion, or leaning over with the chest, is essentially negatively correlated with velocity, right? There'd be just two variables, and then this is the connection between those two. Now, if you just take that in a silo, you just know that information. The more you lean forward, the less velocity you can actually have, okay? And then from a training implication, from a coaching standpoint, then what might you do with that information? You might say okay, we've got to really lean back. We've got to really make sure we're not falling over. Now, what we now know from years of gathering, not just information about patterns, not just information about the connection between patterns, arm, and ball flight, but more specifically, we have really, really dove into understanding how the beginning phases of the motion alter the end of the motion. There is no single, this is happening at the end of the motion and this is how it's related to performance, so let's go attack it. We have to then understand, why would a pitcher be in position to decelerate with their trunk in that? So instead of doing drills where you just ask them to extend the knee or push back, essentially, what we now have learned is that in that specific example, the things that are going on could be, it's a posture breakdown from maybe how not having the pelvis underneath of them at a certain time in the motion. And so what we are now able to do in this relationship is not only look at that, what's happening at the end, how is it impacting what's going on with the ball, but then here's what we would expect. It's this piece that's leading to that. It's this piece. It's this piece. And now we really can really get after these answers. Ones that we feel as if we have been able to find through wearable sensors, but now with really, really strong data. Another example that kind of comes to mind is the longer your stride length, that's correlated positively to velocity. That may be true. But when we first got that information, when that information became available to us, then what do you think coaches are going to do? They're going to tell pitchers to stride out as far as they can go. Right. The longer you stride, the harder you're going to throw. But now, because of the information that, again, we have learned along the way that we are bringing to the table, we now know, no. It's about top of arm circle down. If you overcommit to that stride, you're going to lose stretch in that rotational sense. So now us fully understanding, as you're saying, the totality of the motion, this full, what happens when you're on the ground. What I always say to athletes in debriefs, that once you take off into your launch phase, you're a projectile.
Totally.
We do not try to influence the projectile while it's in the air. So us understanding when an athlete does this, it's almost always because of this, and or this. And now those are the things we can go after, right? It's real roots and understanding connections between what's happening in the pitching motion and how it's influencing the patterns down the chain, and then ultimately the ball. And now this becomes relevant for training impact. Totally. This becomes relevant to coaches. I have always felt that the number one reason why when people hear biomechanics from a coaching standpoint, and I get it, I don't come from a true biomechanics background. I really, in softball, come from a coaching standpoint. You hear biomechanics, it's like, I'm not a biomechanist. I don't want to see graphs. I don't want to hear sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse plane. I'm trying to win. I'm trying to get my pitcher to throw harder. And that's all, that's legit. That kind of feedback is we get it.
That's real.
And so when you have things come out in literature that's this single variable is connected to this, that does nothing. That provides the coach with nothing. And if anything, may even be very misleading for what they should be going after. So the reason why I'm so excited about not only having access to people who are helping us sort through the data and provide a level of brain power that is only making our team stronger, giving us the access to the equipment that is of gold standard status, essentially. But beyond that, it's really this concept of, it's not, well, let's see what we find. It's this true understanding by us of what I feel like the motion, it's been really misunderstood. Mm-hmm. We have treated it, we've taken questions. You referenced something like the trickle down. When someone says trickle down from baseball, I'm triggered, because what I call it is a baseball hand-me-down. Right. And what I always say is no, we deserve better.
Yeah.
In the meantime, as long as we are treating our motion and our position as a baseball hand-me-down, we are training our pitchers incorrectly. We're putting them at increased risk for pain and injury. So no more, right? So from my standpoint, we have been treating it as if it is from the ground, single rotation. Let's pay attention to top of arm circle down, and let's pretend that at top of the arm circle, I have my foot anchored in the ground like an overhand throw. So right. Research is current research is so connected to that concept, and it is a translation from baseball, not understanding the very unique complexity of our motion, which is that actually what sets up where you are at top of the arm circle is the initial push off, that initial turn, and it's in the air, which means the research questions cannot be the same. And so we now know that. We now can bring that to this relationship. And I think it's what makes this partnership just so incredible, that both sides are so valuable and bringing so much to the table. And it brings me really so much confidence in what we can learn.
I think, I again, coming from the academic world, I think I have a perspective of, kind of how we got to this point where we're starting to take these individual variables, these very linear relationships, or seeking these linear relationships. And I think it's important for, anybody that does this kind of work, that what drives research publication is novelty, right? It's finding a difference, it's finding a relationship. And there are lots of ways to establish that through different types of statistics, through, honestly just collecting a bunch of variables and seeing what matches. And the reason that type of research, the novelty, is important is that in the academic world, publications mean job security, right? And so that, I'm absolutely I'll say a victim of that system where, in order for, your promotion and tenure, that part of your job is to, as a researcher, is to get published. And so from the, the academic publishing side, it's rewarded to be novel. It's rewarded to find these, seemingly nuanced relationships because, the journal wants the attention. It's just like likes and views on social media. It's the same concept. And so there is a lot of reward for, researchers and grad students, and it's not their fault. It's the system of, let me just collect a bunch of things and see what sticks, and is there a relationship there, and maybe sometimes backtracking to explain why that relationship maybe came up in the first place. And, I wish I could tattoo it on myself, but, when we talk about P being less than 0.05, there's always a 5% chance that relationship, that difference, that, variable in its relationship to something else was just chance. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I talked about the last episode of replication research. It's not a one and done study, right? In true human subjects research, when we talk about things like effect sizes, is the effect large? Is the difference large? Is it meaningful? You have to collect lots and lots of humans to do that. Lots and humans to do that. And oftentimes it is something that's plagued biomechanics research and human subjects research, forever, is that we oftentimes draw conclusions on really small sample sizes. Mm-hmm. We look for these novel relationships because it's what gets us published, right? Research that says there's no difference often is not going to get published. And so it tends to drive this sort of, let me look for these really, particular things just to get my paper out there and be rewarded for that. And again, I don't fault anybody. That's the system. And I think it's just important that we acknowledge that.
So there's two things that I'm hearing from what you're saying. One is that this concept of let's just collect a bunch of data and see what's correlated. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean, well, that's wrong. No. But that doesn't, I would venture to say that very rarely, when that's how you're going into a biomechanics lab, is that going to be applicable to anyone who's trying to actually influence the motion, right? This concept of just what variables are connected, let's chase the variable. What we know is that is, right. You have to understand what even gave you a shot at getting that particular variable, right? So this concept of a linear relationship, we know is that's dangerous. And that's often where publications come from, what literature talks about. And then as coaches, we think we can do something with that. We can't. Yep. Okay. And then what I was going to say is you kept talking about, publications are about job security. It's that, I guess, I didn't talk about from our value. We want to have publications because we know the information is what should be out there, but your job is not banking on it.
I got to tell you, it's really freeing.
Yeah.
To be out of that system, it's very freeing.
Yeah, my job is not banking on that. So to be out of that world is actually really great because we're being driven by the right things. So for us, anything that gets out there are no research questions that we're going to be presenting that we do not think could get in the hands of a coach and make a difference. And right now, that is the world that we live in where there's a huge gap. Yep. What's researched and what you can actually do with that practically. I don't even want to call that a gap. I mean, that's an ocean between the two of them. So I think that's really, really important to understand here is that we are going into this with this impacts performance, this understanding of not a single variable, but multiple variables and their connection is linked to performance. And so I think that's just a huge, huge piece here. And like I said, I can't really speak enough about this of why this is different. This isn't just we got access to a biomechanics lab and we're messing around in there to figure something out.
We're tinkering. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
Not what it is. I just want to, clarify that not even clarify, re-emphasize that, anyone who is pursuing academic research, they want to have community value. They want to be able to reach these external stakeholders that are going to be impacted by the research. If it is, if it's grant funded, especially if it's, federally grant funded, there has to be an impact back to the population on which you are studying. That is just, the ethics of human subject research. And so it's why this gap is so frustrating, is that it's not actually making its way back to the people who can really make the change, right? And to put it in a language in an application that a coach can then use, or even to inform, parents about the safety of the motion. And so, one of the things I'm really proud about this process is it's not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. We are inviting athletes into the lab from the community. We are coordinating to bring pitchers into the lab. We are coordinating with external partners to host events to bring pitchers in the lab. But it's not just about the quantity of that data. We are also delivering our assessment process to the individual athlete. And so when you talk about the benefit, it sometimes it's hard to get subjects into a lab if you're not going to pay them, right? Because they don't see the benefit of, all right, in 5 years when this paper makes it out somewhere, I'm going to say, woohoo, I had a part of that. What the value we bring to our side, from our side, is that we are delivering an immediate value because that information is actionable on that athlete's individual story, and we can start to collect some of this aggregate data, start to see the big picture, and not just across, playing levels, fine, but I think we know lots of young players who throw really hard that have troubling pitching patterns. And so to start to look at these things, not just from, well, let me collect youth pitchers in high school and then college, but let me just collect everybody. And let's start to stratify them a little differently, stratify them the way that we do in our facility of, okay, who is at highest risk, and, bring these questions that are very performance driven, very coach driven, very driven by the conversations we have with our families and our, colleges we consult with about injury, and I think it's such a great reciprocal relationship that, what they provide, what we bring to them, it's a partnership. I'm really proud of us for that.
Yeah. And I think that you make a great point. This is not just about growing the database of information when it comes to softball pitching. Our current assessment is about, let's understand your patterns and how they make you. And the things that you're trying to go after performance-wise or health and wellness-wise, how are your patterns connected to that story? What should we change and what should we not? Again, if you didn't listen to the episode before this, you should, because it's not always, let's make sure your patterns look better, because we might understand that pattern is giving you this ball flight. So you've got to understand that. We can't change it because it'll take what makes you great, but it also puts you at increased risk for pain, right? And so we've got to really have a workload conversation. Your workload is unique to you. Your workload management and that its structure is unique to you. So these conversations, we already do this.
Right.
So we're now getting the opportunity to now deliver that same information. This is what you're talking about. We're delivering our assessment report. This same information, which with elevated levels of technology and data, right? And so there is an immediate, it's the type of product that athletes are seeking from us on a regular basis here at OGX, right? And so it's our ability to really expand the quality of that data, but to tell a very similar story. So that makes, again, it's such an incentive for athletes to come to the lab because it's what they come here for, right?
Absolutely.
So we have this opportunity to now continue to deliver a more elite level product, essentially. Same story, same connection, but with even more, connected to gold standard data, while growing this overall database for softball pitching. And there's this world where when we really get this in a place where it's easy for a pitcher to just come in, the data can spit out, which obviously we're working on. It's a lot less manual to tell the story and to connect all its pieces. It provides an opportunity for other labs across the country to be able to get this information to their coaches and their pitchers. That, the world of where when coaches want to know this story about the pitchers on their staff at the college level, that it doesn't require us to maybe always, get on an airplane and go there to be able to deliver this, where they might have access to that. But right now, until we're able to say, this is how the lab should be set up, These are the variables that you want to pay attention to. Here's how they'll come into this report, and this is the information it'll tell you. Our ability to do that through this UNO relationship is going to open up opportunities for universities all across the country.
Right. It's no different than the teams we consult with now who maybe also have wearable sensors. We need this view, we need this view, we need this many of this. It's the same sort of protocols and parameters. But, I get asked often, hey, our campus has a biomechanics lab. I don't know who runs it, but I'll figure it out, because coaches want this information. They want, everyone is looking for the edge, right? And I would argue maybe, 5 to 7 years ago, it was nutrition and mental performance, and it's going to be sports science. It's already sports science, and biomechanics is a piece of that. And coaches, they want the edge. Every coach does. And so they want to leverage everything they have on their campus. And, the goal is not to collect this data and then just hold it close to us and do nothing with it. Obviously the goal is to publish in research journals and to get the academic community with a better understanding of things, to grow other labs, to give them resources. But it's also to have this data feed technology and to feed, companies that want to base products on pitching biomechanics. And make sure that data is quality. That the goal is to make sure that, whatever is driving the evolution of how we evaluate pitchers is based on sound information. And that's been a struggle up until now. It's been a struggle.
You made the comment that if a coach they want this information. And I would say that if you're a coach out there and you're like, that's not my world. If you've ever thought about workload, adjusting workload, understanding what a pitcher needs from a workload standpoint, not just in game, but between games. If you've ever managed a pitcher with pain, if you've ever thought we need her to have a better drop ball, she needs more on that rise ball, whatever that is. If you've ever felt like you're in that world, which is every coach ever, you are in the understanding pitcher pattern world.
I always say coaches are biomechanists. It's just when we use the word biomechanist, I think people just assume it goes to things like living in a lab. I would say like that somebody maybe who's quantitative, right? You're collecting data, there's numbers, there's things involved, but every coach is a qualitative biomechanist. If you're studying someone's pitching motion,
someone's movement,
totally. If you're watching somebody move, if you're seeing something, you're watching fatigue develop in her. You can see a pitch move. That's biomechanics. It's just understanding that there are patterns to human movement. There's some predictability to it. The other piece of it is just put numbers to it. But I say coaches are biomechanists. Totally. I always say that. I mean, the coach's eye is very, very relevant. It's not that any of the work that we're doing or any of the work, that brings this level of data to any sport replaces a coach's eye. That's not what it's supposed to do.
No.
But there are many aspects of human movement that are just too fast for our eyeballs, right? And, things like ball flight have helped us to understand, what actually contributes to break. And just in the same way that this level of, investigation and data collection is going to really help us to dig even deeper into, the details of the motion. And it's not to replace a coach's eye. It's to enhance it. It's to make it better.
And it's to take the guesswork out. There's so much noise in pitching.
You don't have time to guess. Who has time to guess?
And there's like, is this guy right? Is she right? Is that opinion right? It's like taking the guesswork out. Like, we don't have time. We've got workload issues. We've got arm pain. We need to not know if we should be doing this start type or starting like this or moving like this. So it takes the subjective element. It takes the guesswork out. And now we can say, like, we know that we can apply objective data to understanding what leads to what gives access to this. So it is coaching.
Right.
And I think that's what the first episode of this was all about, is understanding that we came in as coaches. Like, if it doesn't help me as a coach, get it off the table, right? And so everything we have driven from a research question, even before access to UNO, has been about this, and now we're just extending it beyond.
100%.
So I want to just wrap up. I'm actually going to ask everyone to we're going to switch gears. I'm going to show my screen here. What we're looking at is some of the visuals of what we're getting from the UNO lab. Now, there is not data attached to this. We have data. We have a laundry list of data points. But as you can see, the types of things and type of information that we are getting from the force plates that we're obviously utilizing in the lab, we're able to look at directional components. There's a variety of things here that we are able to see that are we're not able to get when we look at our wearable sensors. So for this athlete in particular, this is a real picture. This is real data. It's just a skeleton, obviously, and we can see the force. We can see all of the vectors here, which are showing where her posture is, how much force she's landing with. This particular picture, we know that we're getting numbers that are showing us that she has too much trunk rotation during this time. What that leads to is this replant. So this understanding of what a replant is, why we don't want to just go after dragging the toe, but where it comes from. I'm going to click forward a little bit and show this. Take a look at the types of data that we're seeing. Not only the amount of force someone's putting into the ground, we're getting numbers that are looking at, how much and what timing, how fast can she move it? Is it on time with the arm? When she lands, how much of that is coming down? Again, what's the timing with the arm? All of these things. We've discovered concepts like trunk arm timing through our wearable sensors. Now we have this opportunity to really look at it. Here's this trunk flexion standpoint, this concept of utilizing knee extension, which in my mind is a huge, huge issue in our game. Let me jump back forward here, but a huge issue in our game as long as we are teaching pitchers to seek air time with the stride leg, with this quad anterior dominant movement. What happens is that we are eliminating their ability to create or put on the brakes in the right part of the body. What we know that strong front side resistance is about is an upward tilt or hike in the pelvis. So when you create your air time, not from ground up through pelvis to actually get appropriate hike numbers, what we actually see is that the hike, the position of the pelvis is not the pelvis is not in position to absorb that force. And so this pitcher not only is leaning forward, but to absorb some force is going to lock that knee out. We have seen some catastrophic injuries, continue to see catastrophic injuries in all levels of the game with ACLs, hyperextension in this knee. And it's important that we, from an OGX standpoint, we know where this is coming from because we started to see this relationship just through our wearable sensors about 2 years ago of when our pitchers are not achieving certain hike numbers in that pelvis. Knee extension is a primary landing strategy. And now we're starting to see when coaches are not understanding, when we are just seeing a pitcher who's really good on TV and we're like, well, she does this, let's replicate it. Right. We're like, no. That pattern, especially at high velocities, is very dangerous. That's a very dangerous braking mechanism to just extend that knee in our movement. And so this is a great example of showing, not only getting the data, but for someone to see just this visual of where this information is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the ability for us to be able to, quantify what's happening, obviously, under the feet, but to then match it very clearly to these events that we know are important, to really quantify and standardize how we describe the pitching motion is the thing I am most excited about in the next couple of months. We really want to try to provide a standard way to say this is what it means to be in good trunk arm timing, right? Good is so subjective. It's so, relative, so to speak, but we can start to actually say, this is what this looks like.
Yeah.
This is what this means. And, I think of, the high school pitcher transitioning into college and having landing mechanics like that, where, she's either being taught or driving knee extension, or she has that combination plus a replant and she's doubling her energy in her system. And now she starts to add mass through a great strength and conditioning program. And it's just putting fuel on the fire. And these are things where we saw the connection between health history, right? The visual, obviously through video, the data from the sensors, and said, okay, there's a connection here.
Yes.
This is really the key connector to, all right, let's really understand all the details at the same time, because we do have to infer, right?
Yeah, right.
Between, her story of health history, which is it's human behavior to sometimes forget things, right? But the story of the health history, the subjective, somewhat view of high-speed camera, plus the numbers, we saw this pattern already. But this level of data is just going to let us, really get at the root of it.
So I wanted to show that visual because I think those are two good examples of we started to see early on a few years ago when we have athletes who replant. It's because it's not just random. It's all because they have excessive rotation at a certain point in the motion, right? This is a relationship we saw. So because that's not legal in our game right now, it's relevant. We have to know. We can't just teach her to like drag on top of her toe. We're now taking away her ability to create stretch, to rotate, to transfer energy. So you have to understand it's not about attacking the drag foot. It's about understanding why she needed that in the first place, right? That's an example. This concept of what we now see, our athletes who are having knee injuries and that landing leg, we're seeing it on, we're seeing it at the college level, that what we started to see a few years ago was that it's related to this stride leg in the air to create airtime, get over that hurdle. I've done drills like that as a coach years ago, like get over. And so as the stride leg is doing that, again, now it's putting the landing, the body in a position at landing where the pelvis can't hike, can't absorb. And now the strategies are really, really unhealthy for a pitcher. So, we have gathered this information. We've seen this connectivity. Now I wanted to just point those out because they are very, very relevant in our game. I'm going to show one more that I also think we don't know is relevant in our game yet, but we know is really relevant in our game. So switching back to the computer, this is going to be a concept that we have seen, probably about a year of how much. There's a variety of reasons why this may happen. Sometimes it's when a pitcher, this is a right-handed pitcher, she's really quad dominant in her load. She sort of just punches this quad forward. Sometimes it's just she loses pelvic stability and we're going to get hike or rotation here. But what I'm getting at is when you can watch this vector and the posture, the alignment of it, how her posture is going to pull. Essentially, when the non-dominant side of the body, so as a right-handed pitcher, her left side, the posterior side of her left side stays loaded or has too much tension, it influences the direction of launch. What I mean by that is that she will land all the way over, almost off of the force plate here. And there's a lot of implications for that because at the end of the day, the pelvis, the lower half gets sent in one direction and then the upper body has to sort of pull away from it. There are major implications here on low back health, hip health in that landing strategy, what typically that does to posture, the arm slot it gives somebody. Oftentimes when these pitchers throw hard, if they have these patterns, they throw hard and they throw backspin. This is like a direct forearm pain, right? Because we know, be on alert, this pitcher has all of those variables that are telling us if this is her velo, this is her break profile, and these are her patterns, we need to know that there's a connection here. Doesn't mean we predict things, right? It's never that simple, but that she's at that increased risk for that. And so oftentimes when we have talked about pitchers from a coaching realm and their stride, there's a power line, there's things like that, but I don't think we truly understand how loading one side of the body versus the other impacts direction.
What the trade-off is.
Yes.
There's a trade-off of, whether it's stride length or stride height. We need both. You talked about projectile motion. That's basic physics, right?
Yep.
Projectile motion, we need both. And so what is the trade-off? I think that's something that it's not one or the other. That's when we talk about being able to answer some of these questions or dig into these questions.
Yep.
I go back to like the inside of the drag leg, being so inside that ankle, that medial knee, the thigh. I mean, it's so clear in these patterns when they develop that like this gives us the ability to start to really understand true roots.
Sure.
True roots.
Absolutely. So again, we can't emphasize enough how excited we are for this work. It's not upcoming. We're in the middle of it now. It's already going on. We already have pictures and data in the lab, as we've shown. We have spent years, as we both mentioned in our last episode, on wearable sensors to understand these relationships and these connections. But at the end of the day, now our ability to educate other coaches, athletes, families about patterns and their relationship to, again, workload, pain, ball flight, velocity break, etc. Now having this level of technology that there is nothing better. This is the gold standard. Now we're getting every bit of information to now be able to educate the rest of the country, or who knows, globally, about the motion. It's fantastic. And again, this is really what we mean. I wanted to give these examples to show what I mean by targeted research questions. We've already started to see and have spent years understanding these relationships. Now we get to apply the best data there is to be able to use it to get others to understand it as well.
Yeah, that direction of launch concept is another separator from baseball. It's
Absolutely.
a huge separator.
Yep.
In addition to the double turn, that's another one.
Yeah.
It's something that we are actively working to identify, to understand, to analyze, because it can't be the same from baseball. It just can't.
So for all of you who are listening today, obviously we appreciate your time today, but be on the lookout. We're going to continue. As you know, here at OGX, we don't just collect data and information to keep to ourselves. It is so important for us to keep pushing information out. So whether it's in social media posts, eventually having some literature out there available, continue to, obviously we'll keep informing you when there's more and more to be educated on, the data that we're finding, maybe relationships we didn't know existed that we're now being able to find. So stay on board with us, obviously, as we're able to find out more and more through this relationship with UNO and the data that we're able to collect there. We're all in this together. So we have taken on the role of like, we want to lead it. We want to be in position to sort of, like we're not winning ball games here. So we feel like our job is to lead in this understanding of research and education. And then our job is to just keep passing and passing. So hopefully, if you're not already on board, obviously, with our network and community of coaches, of researchers, of parents, of pitchers who want to know more. Hopefully this conversation obviously gets you on board to think like, we got to keep digging for information. That's not only going to help, individual pitchers, it's just going to grow the position as a whole. Yeah. So thank you for listening today. Be sure to be looking out for next episode of Redefine the Circle. We appreciate your time today. We appreciate all of the support that you give us here at OGX. Remember, between now and next episode, keep questing on to redefine the circle. Thanks, everyone.